This is your Olympic hero and former WWE champion, Kurt Angle. And I just wanted to give a shout out to my guys, Clint and Noah. When it comes to covering sports, there is no one better. And believe me, that's true. It's damn true.
Gentlemen, you are the top 1%.
The elite. Best of the best.
You are now listening to the Elite Sports Podcast, brought to you by Vermeil Wines and powered by GASN Sports, the pinnacle of hard-hitting sports talk, featuring weekly expert analysis and top-notch interviews. And now, please welcome your hosts, Noah Groniger and Clint Schweitzer.
Well, you've waited for it, you've clamored for it, and on this week's edition of the Elite Sports Podcast, it is finally happening. We are doing a deep dive into Big Ten football, Noah, and I've waited so many years to make this happen, but we're going to be joined by none other than former Nebraska Cornhusker Adam Carriker. We're going to be talking a little Nebraska, a little Big Ten. I know, we like to keep our kind of ears to the ground when it comes to the SEC, but the problem is the SEC keeps having games postponed all over the place. Teams aren't playing football, so the team that was late to the party, the Big Ten, we're going to do some Big Ten stuff. Are you ready? Are you excited? I know you're such a huge fan of the Big Ten. I know this is your thing. It's finally happening. Frozen tundras all over the upper Midwest, and all these cities, all these towns have clamored for the Elite Sports Podcast, and they're getting it right here.
I've always said just football's not the same anymore. I'm not even sure we can call it football. They're throwing the ball all over the yard. The rules favor the offense. The defense can't do anything. They're just tied. Their hands are tied behind their backs out there. So I'm good that we can talk some Big Ten football. It's kind of getting into a time machine and going back into the past, going back to like 1930, where forward passes were just not in the game. They're illegal. Like no one even knows what it is or how to do it. So we're just getting into some 3 yards in a cloud of dust, and I'm ready for it.
Well, from programs that were once proud that have fallen on their faces, like Michigan and like Nebraska, we'll talk with Adam Carriker about that. Even Penn State starting the year 0-4, despite being a top 10 team to start the year. It's not looking good. Really all that matters, though, from this conference right now is that Ohio State show up, play their games, win enough, have as few possible, canceled due to COVID, get to the college football playoff. That's really the goal for this conference right now, isn't it?
Yeah, it has to be. I mean, you've got Wisconsin out here that's going to have a say in this. Not much of one when it comes down to it, but they're going to have a say. They're going to have their opportunity. Indiana is kind of a shocker that they're just rolling through their schedule. They're undefeated, and they may have a say in this as well. Again, but like you said, it's going to be Ohio State. They're going to just get to the college football playoff and see where the chips may fall. But, yeah, that's really all it is. But maybe if Wisconsin and Indiana can do something, getting a good bowl or something, maybe that is a leg that the Big Ten can stand on as well, to have two other teams that are doing well and getting into good bowl games. It's not just Ohio State. Well,
for Michigan, for Jim Harbaugh, it looks like it could be curtains. It looks like it could be goodnight nurse, to quote my good friend Noah Groniger. What's going on at Michigan? We talked with Jeffrey Chadia last week, who went to Michigan, now a writer for NFL.com. And, he kind of alluded to the fact that he does not believe that Jim will be coaching at Michigan next year. That's not very much of a stretch, considering the Wolverines lost 49-11 to Wisconsin since he made those comments. Man, it's just really unbelievable to see how Jim tried to go in there. The expectation was they were going neck and neck with Ohio State, and they could even overtake Ohio State with the retirement of Urban Meyer. That hasn't been the case. Ohio State continues on its trajectory, while Michigan, they keep going down rungs of the ladder, along with their cohorts there in the state, Michigan State. Both teams are afterthoughts in 2020.
Yeah, I think Michigan fans were thinking, okay, we saw him in the NFL with the 49ers. We saw what he did, resurrecting Alex Smith's career, bringing on Colin Kaepernick, what he was able to do with that, getting all the way to the Super Bowl. Before losing to the Baltimore Ravens. We saw what he did in college at Stanford. He had Andrew Luck. He's going to be able to find a quarterback, even if it's not Andrew Luck, because that's once in a generation type player. He's going to be able to find a guy, even in Alex Smith, Colin Kaepernick type quarterback, whatever he has, and he's going to be able to mold them and develop them. And that just has been the opposite of what we've seen. That has not been the case at all. He's had all of his quarterbacks that he's picked whether it be Shea Patterson. I mean, whoever it is out there, whoever he's had come in, he has not been able to develop them, progress their game, get a good quarterback that can throw an accurate pass, and that has just hamstrung this offense and this team, and that is going to be his downfall. Are the Michigan just brass and boosters? Are they going to allow themselves to get rid of their favorite son, Jim Harbaugh, as head coach? He's struggling. It's been years and years. They can't beat Ohio State. They can't beat really anybody right now. And so it's going to be interesting to see if they actually pull the trigger and fire Jim Harbaugh.
Well, we're going to also be talking, of course, more Nebraska, which is in a similar situation, hiring Scott Frost, one of their own as well, a quarterback that led the Huskers to the 1997 national championship. We talked to former defensive end Mike Rucker from Nebraska, from the Carolina Panthers, just a few weeks ago, and talked about Scott as a teammate, some of the attributes that he thought would make him a good head coach maybe in the future. And right now, it's just not working out. Now, Nebraska did get a win over Penn State, and let me run this by you. We're going to talk to Adam Carriker about this coming up. But the schedule for Nebraska, they play Illinois on Saturday. They've got Iowa, Purdue, and Minnesota left. Could that be maybe the start of some momentum for Nebraska? We saw Luke McCaffrey come in at quarterback and was able to move the ball at least relatively well in the first half before they really the wheels kind of fell off and they had to hold on to beat Penn State after building a big lead. But this could be an opportunity to get some wins on the schedule and maybe at least go into 2021 feeling a little bit better about themselves. Because so far, Scott Frost, I mean, let's just call it like it is. I don't know if I'm going to say this to Adam Carriker because the guy was a monster on the field, still just an absolute physical specimen, but it's been a dud. It's not working. And I don't know what you're going to be able to take from the rest of this, but maybe get some wins under the belt and keep going forward.
Yeah, I mean, that's really all that they can do right now. All they can do is move on from where they are at and finish out this season as strong as they can and move into 2021 with hopefully Luke McCaffrey and being able to really develop the game plan and system around him and what he can do. Athletic, can throw the football a little bit, but that's not what he's there for. He's there to run the football, be athletic, misdirection, have some jet sweeps, and either you fake it, read option plays. That's what he's there to do for Scott Frost. That's what Nebraska does. No matter who's head coach, that's their style. That's what they do. I'm going to be interested to see this Iowa game coming up because Iowa's playing well. They just destroyed Minnesota off the football field, and they're always a tough team under Kirk Ferentz. They're always going to have defense. They're going to have a running game. I don't know how many passes the quarterback can complete, but it doesn't matter. They don't usually need that. They've got a good running game, so it's going to be interesting to see what Nebraska can do against this stout Iowa defense. They did beat Penn State, but Penn State looks like they were vastly, supremely overrated from the get-go.
Well, we're going to be talking with our guest this week. Coming up after this, Adam Carriker, former Nebraska Cornhusker, former All-Big 12 performer, former first-round pick from the St. Louis Rams back in 2007. And stay tuned in segment 3. We're going to be talking a little Chiefs Raiders, National Football League. Don't go away. Well, there's nothing that goes better with football than beer, and we're excited to have Golden Road Brewing as one of our newest sponsors for the show. Founded in 2011, Golden Road is Los Angeles' largest craft brewery with brew pub locations across California.
Golden Road is excited to celebrate the Kansas City Chiefs with its partnership beer, Kingdom Blonde Ale. Kingdom Blonde is available at local retailers and in the Chiefs Stadium during regular seasons.
Golden Road's year-round offerings include Mango Cart Wheat Ale, Wolf Pup IPA, and Fruit Cart Hard Seltzer. Golden Road brewers are constantly experimenting with the freshest ingredients to keep fans' taste buds happy with a collection of rotating seasonals, creative flavors, and classic craft brews.
Pick up a case of Golden Road beer at your local store to enjoy before the next game. Visit goldenroad.la/beerfinder to buy Golden Road beer now.
We appreciate you joining us. Coming off a big Nebraska win this past Saturday, and you, of course, do a tremendous video series for the Omaha World-Herald. Always great to check that out, man. And now, you had 10 takeaways from the win over Penn State. To me, looking at the schedule kind of from an outsider, Adam, we're from Kansas City, and we cover everything from the Big 10, Big 12, and the SEC. But looking at Nebraska here, this is a real chance to get some momentum going forward without doing too deep of a dive, man. This win over Penn State, they were able to hold on. with game against Illinois coming up, still got Purdue and Minnesota on the schedule. This has a real chance to get some momentum for this team, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's weird because I don't even think Husker fans even realize that. It's just kind of like, it's been, 357 days since we'd had a win. Of course, the season got pushed way back, so that contributed to that. But Husker fans are just like, man, we got to win, and, Penn State's having a rough year, but they are a talented team nonetheless. So I think you make a great point, and I don't even think it's really registered with Husker fans because you got an Illinois team coming in that, I feel like we can definitely have some success and get a win against. You get a couple in a row because Scott Frost had talked about, man, he's like, I just feel like we're so close. You just got to get that win, that confidence, and that momentum. And if we could pull off 2 in a row, I mean, you never know what can happen. Minnesota doesn't look phenomenal. We got Iowa coming in for Black Friday, so that's always a highly intense game. So you never know what could happen if they could get this W against Illinois.
Well, where do things stand with Scott Frost, a favorite Nebraska son? He's there as head coach. And do you see at all, is Nebraska in danger of being in Jim Harbaugh and Michigan territory where Michigan, they've got their favorite son, Michigan's son, and Jim Harbaugh there as head coach, and they're having to question, like, can we really get rid of him? But the performance isn't there on the field, so we may have to get rid of our favorite Michigan son as head coach and Jim Harbaugh. Could that happen to Scott Frost in Nebraska here?
I'm completely bamboozled by the Michigan thing because you look at what Harbaugh did at Stanford. I mean, people forget just how horrifically horrible Stanford was when they were bad. They were winning like 1-2 games a year, and then he takes them to top 5, top 10. He goes to San Francisco where they're just as bad, like 2-14, 3-13, has all that success. As the 49ers, goes to Michigan where he should actually be able to recruit with a brand name like that, and he's been struggling. So as far as Nebraska, is the potential there to be in the same boat? Yeah, the potential is there. If we struggle the rest of this year and we struggle next year, you never know what could happen. I don't think we're there yet. Harbaugh's been at Michigan longer, so he's had more of an opportunity, more chances. As far as Nebraska, that potential is there. Hopefully we don't get to that point. But for me, Frost hasn't had quite as much time, although you are in year 3, a very odd year. But nonetheless, it's year 3. So we're not there yet. Hopefully we never get there. But the potential definitely is to be there. I do think some Nebraska fans kind of have the mindset of, well, if Frost can't do it, then who can? And whether that's the correct mindset or not can be debated. But for me, I think because of that mindset, he's going to get a lengthy amount of time, to try to get this thing turned around.
Well, as we look at the rest of the Big Ten, of course, first kind of want to just get your thoughts on the Big Ten kind of being late to the party here, just a few weeks now into the season. It's an odd reversal of fortune. Now it's the SEC that's canceling all their games, and maybe the Big Ten will wind up catching up in the amount of games being played. But kind of your overall thoughts on that and how hard Nebraska fought to make the season happen. And maybe there is no Big Ten football without Nebraska and kind of some of the things that a lot of the players' parents put into place. And then just your thoughts on the conference in general when you got Ohio State that looks like a shoe-in for the playoff. But my goodness, out of the blue comes Indiana playing really well. And, of course, that's in the other division. And then just the collapse of Michigan and Michigan State. This has been kind of a crazy start to the season, but just kind of wanted your take on the Big Ten being late and now some other teams popping in here like Indiana.
Yeah, as far as the Big Ten being late to the table, and I'm a Nebraska guy, so maybe I don't see through it, with 100% clear lenses. Maybe it's a little biased with fogginess on my part, but I don't think there is Big Ten football without the way Nebraska and the parents and some of the players and students went after it. I don't think there's Pac-12 football because the Pac-12 was done when the Big Ten was done. So I do think there is that. As far as the Big Ten being late, I mean, when they canceled, I honestly think they thought everyone else would just fall in line. Everyone else would just cancel. They'd just be the first of many dominoes, and that did not happen. And now they've kind of boxed themselves into a corner where it's a condensed season with like many conferences, but there's no extra weeks. There's no opportunity to make up games. And it's kind of like, Wisconsin, if they miss one more game, they could go undefeated, not even playing the Big Ten title game because you have to have played at least 6 games. So for me, I mean, at least we're playing football, but I feel like it was done really poorly, not giving ourselves the best opportunity, because even though the SEC's canceling games, they have opportunities to try to get more games in than us ultimately, potentially, depending on how many cancellations there are. As far as, Purdue and Indiana, I mean, as if 2020 wasn't off the wall enough. Who would have thought that Michigan State would be struggling, Minnesota, who everyone thought would be pretty good, and then here comes Indiana, and here comes Purdue. Northwestern is doing good, and they've had success in the past, but part of me likes it because I like unpredictability. Part of me doesn't like it because I want those brand names to be doing good. For me, I'm just looking to see how Indiana does versus Ohio State this weekend. Obviously, Ohio State's going to be the favorite, but what can Indiana do? Can they pull off the win? Can they make it close? Do they get blown out? What happens? To me, that's a very intriguing matchup right there.
Well, Adam, I just got to ask you kind of about, in the grand scheme of things, here we are in 2020, the game of football is so much different than it was in the 90s, even the early 2000s. Do you believe in the Nebraska style, the way they play, the running, the read option, the quarterback who they kind of want to throw anywhere between 12 to 15 passes a game and really lean on that run game in an athletic quarterback that can also be in that run game? Do you believe in that ultimately as far as a national championship in today's game?
I mean, if you look at most of the teams, and not everybody's doing it exactly like Nebraska, and not everybody's exactly like each other, but you look at Clemson. I mean, Trevor Lawrence actually can run quite well. You look at Justin Fields, Ohio State. You look at what Tua did at Alabama. A lot of the teams have gone spread, read option, a zone read. A lot of these offenses kind of mirror each other. That's what tends to happen. Everybody tends to kind of mirror and copy what's working. So I do think it can work. The only trepidation I've ever had, and I said this when the day Frost got hired, when I was happier, than a kid in the candy store that he got hired, I said my only trepidation is if you watched him at Oregon, and he only had, one real good season at UCF because he was only there for years, so it's hard to get a big gauge. But I look back at Oregon when he was there. A lot of times when they would play top teams, because Oregon's so fast, so much speed, when they would play in Ohio State in the Rose Bowl, or they'd play in Auburn in the national championship, I almost argued that Oregon was too fast because they would become too small, because they'd run into teams with speed and size, and they'd almost get pushed around a little bit. Mm-hmm. So obviously we haven't, we got to win a few more ball games in general before we enter that conversation on a national championship or a Rose Bowl type level. But to me, that's been my only trepidation is, can we still be physical? Because football, at the end of the day, speed, execution, it is still a physical game. So that's been my only trepidation. I do think it can work. I do think it's something we can have success with. But that's been the biggest thing I've always wanted to keep my eye on, if we're able to get to that point to begin with.
Well, Adam, I'll tell you, kind of last thing on Nebraska, and we got a couple NFL things for you, but you look at Scott Frost's record, it's 10-17. I'll tell you this, growing up in Kansas City, Missouri's in the Big 8, Nebraska's in the Big 8, it becomes the Big 12, and I watch the Huskers win 3 national titles in the 90s, and, as a Missouri fan and covering the Missouri Tigers now as we do, that was the program, that was the gold standard. When this thing kind of broke up and Nebraska goes to the Big 10 and 12, Missouri goes to the SEC, and you kind of look at the recruiting, and Nebraska had this, recruiting ground in Texas, and that kind of went away from Missouri and Nebraska. As you look at Nebraska's recruiting class, it's 17th overall by rivals, but it's kind of all over the place as they're trying to get that recruiting ground shored up. As a program, this is very overarching, but as a program, do you think Nebraska is where it needs to be in the Big Ten? And is this kind of, as a Kansas City, and it just seems like the brand name that Nebraska, it's not kind of what it once was here in Kansas City and maybe nationally.
Yeah. I mean, the thing is, Scott Frost has actually recruited fairly well. And I'm not going to lie, we do miss that pipeline that we had down in Texas, and playing all those Texas teams absolutely helped. But Scott Frost has actually recruited well. The biggest issue that I've seen, and full disclosure, not many people want to touch it. They'll kind of point it out and then just move on past it. There's never really, it's, hey, and I don't have the numbers in front of me, but this many kids have left since Scott Frost has got here, and it's a staggering number. And then it's just kind of left alone. Nobody really wants to delve into the why. At first it was, it was Riley's players, or he needed to bring his guys in. A lot of the guys lately have been his guys. And so to me, the issue isn't recruiting. It's maybe recruiting the right guys. It's maybe, how do we keep them in? Because it's great to get them in the door, but how do you develop them if they're out the door in the next year or two? So to me, that's been the biggest hitch in the giddy up, because if you look on offense, there's a lot of young guys. And this is year 3. He should be able to have sophomores, juniors out there, and he has a few, but there's a lot of freshmen. You look at the defensive side of the ball, and they've been able to hold some more of those guys in-house that they've signed, and so they've got a little bit more experience. It's their 3rd year in the scheme. So, you give up 500 yards to Penn State, you still got a lot of improvement to make. But the defense made the 2 big stands at the end of the game, forced a couple of big turnovers, led to 10 points. They're playing better than the offense. To me, the issue is, how do we keep those guys in-house? Are we recruiting the right guys to begin with? So the recruiting rankings, like what Frost is doing, keeping guys in is to me has been the one thing that's like, what's going on in that area?
Yeah, good point. And you were drafted by the St. Louis Rams, first-round pick, number 13 overall. You were there from 2007 to 2009. Your last year there, your head coach was Steve Spagnuolo. Us being here in Kansas City, our defensive coordinator, Spags. Just give us some insight on Spags and kind of his defensive philosophy.
He's a very detail-oriented guy. He's all about, causing havoc and problems in the backfield. It's interesting because I've done a million pass rush stunts in my life, but I've never done them on first down out of a base 4-3 defense. We're doing like tackle and end stunts, and I'm like, whoa, I've never done this, when it's not a obvious passing situation. So, but it's because he just wants to cause havoc. And he's a very detail-oriented guy as far as this alignment and assignment. But when it comes to up front, he ain't fancy about it. He's like, get in the backfield, knock people backwards, cause all sorts of problems and wreckage in the backfield. So that's kind of his philosophy.
Well, it's he's definitely turned this defense around. It's been incredible. And I know, Adam, of course, you finished up your career with the Washington football team. I know you're a guy that's outspoken, and you've been, you've been around and you've done shows. You've done a radio show on WWE, which I'd love to get into that with you sometime. I'm a huge fan going all the way back. And I know you've been on Fox News and Fox Business, and I know that you're, well-spoken on a lot of topics. So you played for the Washington Redskins. I guess we'll beat that out later. But what were just your thoughts, your thoughts on the name change? Because we're good friends with Joe Theismann, and Joe Theismann was not really wanting to get into it. He just said, hey, it is what it is. What was your thoughts on that? Because I know 2020, we've crossed a lot of boundaries. Politics has made its way into sports, man. I guess there's no way around it.
Yeah, my thought has always been this. It's never mattered to me. Okay, you probably are aware of this, but I'm a white guy. I'm a Caucasian guy.
Right.
To me, it's like my opinion doesn't really matter. Okay, it's up to the Native Americans. How do they feel? Do they find it offensive? Are they proud of it? I know some that have, some that are very proud. I know some that do find it offensive. To me, the problem is most of the voices that I see and hear, and obviously I don't see and hear everything, but what I see and hear, it's not them talking. I feel like it's other people speaking for them. And it's like, well, why don't we give them a louder voice, hear what they have to say, and go off of that? Because my opinion when it comes to that doesn't matter. Does it sound like it'd be racist? Yeah, it sounds like it'd be racist, but how do they perceive it? To me, that's all that's ever mattered to me, and to me, that's what we don't hear.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I tell you, Adam, it's just been a true pleasure. I want to have everybody go over to check out all of your stuff. It's the Carriker Chronicles, and it's up every week over at the Omaha World-Herald. You do a great job. It's definitely it's a must view for any Nebraska fan out there. So we'll see how the Huskers do this weekend against Illinois. I'm assuming it takes place by the time this airs. We could just have all sorts of things go wrong. We're covering the Missouri Tigers that haven't played in 3 weeks, Adam. So we're just trying to get this thing going and get some games finished here, man. That's what it's all about, I guess, this year, right?
Going back to your question from earlier, that's all I ever wanted from the Big Ten was to try to play football.
Yeah.
The SEC, obviously they're having issues. Everyone's having issues to some extent. But at least they're trying to play football. I think that was the thing that drove me the most nuts, was they just canceled. And it was like, well, let's at least try. If we can get 8 games, 1 game, 10 games, let's at least try. So I think I'm glad the SEC started earlier. They have more opportunities to get more games in, so I'm happy about that. I am impressed that you knew about the WWE show, because that thing was years ago. I'm still a big-time WWE fan. If you ever Google Fourth and Pain, you will see me much next to a much smaller individual. He lost 250 pounds, so that's a compliment. He lost
I saw that,
and very healthy. Yeah.
You had some great guests on that show. You had Bill Goldberg on all the time, and there was always a rumor back then that the WWE was coming after you. So what we could have had you as a Universal Champion. What happened to that?
Yeah. If you ever have nothing to do with your life, Google Fourth and Pain, and maybe you'll be entertained for like 30 seconds. The banner, but I go back and I look, and man, the banner behind us was just terrible. We should have fixed that. But anyways, as far as that, it was 4 or 5 years ago when I retired. Every time I turn around, it's farther away and I'm older. But I hadn't retired yet. I hadn't retired yet, and they were getting ready to do their last season of Tough Enough, which was about 4 or 5 years ago, and it aired on USA Network in the summer. And they invited me to go do Tough Enough. And I thought about it. I'm like, man, I'm trying to get back into football, and I'm still working out. I don't think I could split time and still have a chance to get back into football, so I passed on it. They called back about a week later, and they said, we understand, and had me do a Skype interview with a whole bunch of them. And they asked me a bunch of questions, and the guy called me afterwards because when I said I couldn't do Tough Enough, then they did the Skype thing. And I guess it was a compliment. He goes, you are as advertised. And I go, what does that mean? He goes, well, a lot of people can run their mouths, but when you get in front of people, can you still run your mouth and sound decent? He's like, you did a good job. I was like, oh, okay, thanks. He goes, you have a standing invitation to come work with us at the Performance Center here in Orlando if you'd like. And it was so long ago, they probably don't even remember it. But, that's how it got left. I never took them up on it, and they've probably long forgotten me since. So
next WrestleMania, Adam Carriker versus Rob Gronkowski. Let's book
it. No fans, though. Sorry.
Well, there wouldn't be any fans anyways.
Exactly.
At least now we have an excuse.
Oh, Adam, you're the best, man. Hope everybody will check you out over at the Omaha World-Herald. It's great stuff. You do a great job. Thank you so much for joining us, man. We'll catch up again soon, brother.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
You bet. There you have it from Adam Carriker. Great stuff. You could check out his video series on the Omaha World-Herald website. He does one each week. So tremendous stuff if you're a Nebraska fan. It's just weird growing up here in Kansas City where Missouri and Nebraska were in the Big Eight and how Nebraska was the top dog, the program you're always chasing. It just seems like slowly but surely the luster and the shine has come off that program. And it's really kind of surreal to think about because in the 80s, certainly in the 90s when they won 3 national championships, they were just, unbeatable. They were the blue blood. They were the team everybody was striving to be. And now I don't know, something about the fact that they've joined the Big Ten. They're in that Big Ten Western Division. They're playing teams like Northwestern. They're playing teams like Purdue. It just feels like the program has kind of went away and hid from the rest of the world. Is that just me? I just don't feel the coverage around us. I mean, we're in Kansas City covering the SEC on a daily basis. That's what we've gone to, and it's like a breath of fresh air. It's like when Dorothy in The Wizard of Oz opens up her door and she's not in black and white anymore. She's in color. That's the SEC. Quite the opposite in the Big Ten, and maybe going off to Siberia wasn't the best decision for Nebraska football.
I agree, but I just think the way that Nebraska football runs their program, like a lot of other Big Ten teams, 3 yards in a cloud of dust, read option, quarterbacks that are going to run power O. Like, I just don't know where that is, where that lands in today's game, where that belongs. You've got everyone throwing the football out there. Even at Ohio State, they're in the Big Ten, but they're throwing the ball around with Justin Fields as well. This 3 yards in a cloud of dust, power run only football team, we're going to try and throw between 12 and 15 passes a game. I just don't know how many games you can win in today's age like that. And definitely I don't see any team winning a national championship like that. So I just don't really understand what they're doing or where they're going as a program.
Guys, we have so much still to come here on the Elite Sports Podcast, but we want to take this time to tell you about our new sponsor, 500 Level. 500 Level is the ultimate sports apparel and fan gear store, and they feature ultra-comfortable custom t-shirts for NFL, NBA, MLB, NHL, and even WWE. I just got a Macho Man Randy Savage shirt from 500 Level that has been a conversation starter everywhere I go. 500 Level was created because they decided it was time to create an apparel company that put the fans right in the mix, instead of having to outfit themselves with the same old gear from major corporations. 500level.com works with exceptionally talented artists, designers, and diehard sports fans to create unique t-shirt designs for fans to wear with pride. I mean, here in Kansas City, it's time to defend that Lombardi trophy. So stock up in 500 Level's unbelievable inventory of never-before-seen designs for players like Patrick Mahomes, Travis Kelce, Tyreek Hill, or even rookie Clyde Edwards-Helaire. You literally can't find that anywhere else. Use promo code KansasCity20 today for 20% off your order at 500level.com. That's promo code KansasCity20 for 20% off only at 500level.com. On to the National Football League, where the Kansas City Chiefs will travel to Las Vegas. At the time this airs, it may have been postponed by now. When this airs on Thursday, when our show comes out, we don't know what's going to happen, as the entire Raiders defense has had some sort of exposure to COVID. There are, I think 8 players maybe on the COVID reserve list. The Chiefs have a couple as well, including tackles Eric Fisher and Mitchell Schwartz. McCole Hardman was a part of that. He may be the only one that tested positive, but I'm so over this stuff. I see these things and I can't keep straight COVID results and numbers and postponements. We've seen the Chiefs have to, displace a couple of games already. Is that what's on the horizon for this game? And as the Chiefs look to this game, going to Las Vegas for the first time to play the Raiders in Las Vegas, coming off of a loss to the Raiders back in October in Kansas City, this seems like a chance for this team to finally, because it's so hard for the Chiefs to whatsoever have bulletin board material, right? To look up and say, this team is disrespecting us. The Chiefs are the defending Super Bowl champion. Noah, they've lost one game in the last 375 days. But guess what? The Raiders have provided that, not only by beating the Chiefs at Arrowhead, but by taking the victory laps around the stadium. This looks like a situation where the Chiefs are going to circle this. Tyrann Mathieu, after the game, said this is not happening again. We're aware. And the team seems to have been slighted by this, including head coach Andy Reid. This has all the makings of the Chiefs going on the road and putting a beat down on the Raiders in prime time, or whenever it may happen.
Yeah, whenever it may happen. I'm going to start there because I think as long as everyone other than Clelin Ferrell, who I believe tested positive and is the person that started this, patient one is what they're saying. So I think we're talking about the players that are just contact tracing. As long as they all hit their negative test this week, and the Raiders will be able to have a majority of their defense eligible. I think it still happens Sunday night. If some of these guys test positive or not enough time in between the contact tracing and the game happens, because you have to have 5 days after you're labeled as, hey, you're in contact tracing, you've been close to Clelin Ferrell, now you got to have 5 days. We got to have these negative tests. As long as they have a majority of their guys eligible to play, I think it happens Sunday night. If it's looking like that's getting off kilter and the Raiders are just going to be hamstrung as to who they're going to be able to play and have out there as starters on their defense, then I think it might get moved to probably a Tuesday. I'm not sure if they're going to do a doubleheader Monday again, but one of those days. I expect it to happen Sunday night, and with that said, I expect the Chiefs to dominate this football game. Patrick Mahomes came on this week in a press conference talking about how they realize that they just can't show up and win. And so that lets you in right there. It's black and white, where he's letting you into their thinking going into that game, where they thought they could just show up. We're the Super Bowl champions. We always beat the Raiders. It's a divisional game. It's whatever. We're not expecting this team to be a really great football team, show up, bring their A game, and beat us. And even if they do, we'll still somehow beat them. We always do. We've won whatever it was, 16, 17 games in a row before that game. So the Chiefs have this one circled now. They're going to bring their A game, and the Raiders aren't going to be able to withstand the just dynamic playmakers that this offense has. And the defense gave up 40 points. They're going to be embarrassed. They're going to want to show out too. Like you mentioned, what Tyrann Mathieu said and what Frank Clark has been saying this week. So we're definitely going to see a blowout. If the Raiders somehow keep this close or win, then they're a team that's going to be right there for the division going down the stretch, but I just don't expect that to be the case.
Do you think in the long run that it's good? It's going to be good for the Chiefs if there's a rival there. Coming into the season, we thought maybe it was going to be Denver. Drew Lock and the Denver Broncos, maybe they were getting better, adding some weapons, and that hasn't really worked out. Drew started the year injured. He's come back, and he's throwing multiple interceptions in games, and they're just not really competitive right now. I don't think Vic Fangio, and we've talked about this, but maybe even John Elway shouldn't be the one surviving this year. But the Raiders, with the turnaround that they've had. Derek Carr having the best year maybe of his career, or at least since that 2016 season when he was up for the MVP before suffering that leg injury. So here's the thing. Is it better for the Chiefs to have a rival in this division that can go blow for blow with them, that can split the two games or can beat the Chiefs on a consistent basis, create a rivalry, and that these teams are kind of squaring off through the season and there's something to play for there? Does that set the team up better for playoff runs? We saw the Patriots and Tom Brady do this in the East, where there just really was no team to challenge them. The Jets, the Bills, the Dolphins could just never really get it done. They never really had any type of team that could compete with the Patriots. Is that what the Chiefs want as well? Or is it better to have, we say in film purposes, we'll say it's better that Luke Skywalker has Darth Vader to counteract him. It's what makes things interesting. It's what makes life interesting, is to have a villain to go along with your good guy. How do you see this playing out?
Well, you just kind of said it right there. Interesting. Yes, I think it would make it more interesting, something to watch, something to keep an eye on if you have a rival, someone that you're going up against, and hey, they may take a game off. You guys may split the series. Who knows? Maybe one year the Raiders win both games. They're really up and coming. They're this rival that's going to match you every step of the way, and you guys are going to be fighting for the division till the last week of the season. Interesting, yes. Better? I don't think so. I mean, you look at you just mentioned it, what the Patriots had. They had walks almost certainly with the Dolphins and Jets and Bills. They'd come up and snipe them a few times, especially down in Miami. It seemed like whenever the Patriots went down to Miami, they struggled, and either it was a close game or they would lose the game. I don't know whether it was the heat or whatever it was. Something would come up and get them in Miami. But the Patriots had walkthroughs. They get to the playoffs. There's other teams out there that you play that are going to get you ready. The whole season isn't a cakewalk. Just because your division is, it just means that many more one seeds that you can clinch and hold on to and have an easier way when you do get to the playoffs, because you have the best record in the NFL. You get the home field advantage. So I think it's better for the Chiefs if the division ends up being more like the old AFC East when the Patriots were reigning over that and the entire NFL. More interesting, yeah, if they have a rival and you don't know where the game's going to go.
Well, I hope you guys have enjoyed everything we're doing. Hope you enjoyed our conversation with Adam Carriker this week, as we really went outside of our element and talked some Big Ten football. Give us credit for that, because, hey, the Missouri Tigers haven't played in 3 weeks. Now, they're going to go play South Carolina, but the Gamecocks just fired their coach, Will Muschamp. They got Mike Bobo in there saying they don't even know if they have enough players. They couldn't beat Missouri right now, even if they did. Missouri has COVID problems of their own. So, it's just a game. Like last week, Missouri's playing Georgia. I'm on the Zoom call with Eli Drinkwitz, and we're taking questions, and we're talking about the game, and then just the next day the game's canceled. It's hard for me to emotionally invest in these games when I know that there's a chance they could be canceled. Hopefully it happens. Hopefully we'll see Missouri and South Carolina put on a show 6:30 on Saturday night. But until then, we know Nebraska, we think anyway, is going to take on Illinois this week. So we got Adam Carriker for you. We've got some Big Ten for you this week, and of course some National Football League. Go to our website, gasnsports.com. Hit that subscribe button on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Stitcher, or Spotify. Any way you choose to take in your podcast, we've got your back right here on the Elite Sports Podcast.